the Bible is the authority on racism, right? That we cannot define racism based on what critical race theory say. We define it based on what the Bible says.
Welcome to the Ryan Holmes podcast, where our goal is to encourage Christian thinking and Christian living. This is episode 18, and I want to welcome you all. I'm extremely excited about today's episode. We're bringing you another interview, and I think you're going to enjoy the subject matter, and I'm just really excited about it. A couple things before we start. If you have been enjoying this podcast, would you please go over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star rating, leave us a review, or do that on whatever audio platform you might be using, and that'll just help boost the podcast reach and visibility so more people can be introduced to it. Like I mentioned last week, for the new year, we've launched our store, so you can now get merch, official merch of the Ryan Holmes podcast, and you can check that out at wretchredeemed.com. Wretchredeemed.com. That is now the official store and brand of the podcast. If you have any questions about today's episode, would you please send me an email to ryanhomespodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear your thoughts. Again, any questions and things along those lines. So please send me an email to ryanhomespodcast@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the podcast and the work that I'm doing, please check out Ryan Holmes podcast.locals.com. That's Ryan Holmes podcast.locals.com. And you can join the community there and subscribe for just $5 a month. And our locals community members get certain perks along with their subscription. For example, you can get 10% off every order from the Wretch Redeemed store. So I encourage you to go check that out, and you'll be supporting the work that I am doing. All right. I hope that you guys will enjoy the interview today, the subject matter. My guest is Samuel Sey. He is a blogger from Slow to Write, slowtowrite.com. I said that right. Is that the correct link, Samuel?
Slowtowrite.com.
All right. Awesome. Slowtowrite.com. He is a blogger, and he tackles the very difficult subject of critical race theory, something that seems to be sweeping our culture and even our churches and the life of Christians. And he tackles that from a very biblical perspective. And I've really enjoyed getting to read his articles, to follow along with his content. And I'm super excited, Samuel, that you chose to join with me today. So thank you for doing that.
Hey, thank you very much, man. You're a fellow Canadian, so all the more I'm going to enjoy this interview.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this chat. So Samuel, would you be able to kind of give us just a bit of your background, kind of the 10,000-foot overview of who you are, and also share when you came to faith?
Yeah. So though I'm in Canada, I was originally born in Ghana. Ghana is a West African country. I was born and raised in Ghana by my single mother. And when I was 10 years old, we moved. She remarried a Ghanaian Canadian, and then we moved to Canada, particularly Montreal, Quebec. So I learned and spoke French a little bit there, and then I moved with my mother to Toronto, or the Greater Toronto area. I currently live in Brampton right now. So my mom is a faithful Christian. I was raised in the church, but I was a deeply sinful boy. Still am very deeply sinful. Just not a boy, a sinful man now. And I heard the gospel many times at home and in church throughout my life, but I knew from a young age that I was a very sinful person. But I knew that I deserved the wrath of God. But yet, that knowledge isn't enough to save you. You need to be. You must be born again, as Christ said. And at a young adults retreat one time, and I did not want to go there. I was actually forced by someone there was someone, an older person at the church who just kept bugging me all the time. It's like, Sam, come, I'm like, just leave me alone. But she wouldn't leave me alone. But that was really the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit, working through her,
Mm.
just compelling me to go to this event. And when I went there, I heard the same gospel I'd heard many times. In many, many ways, this was actually within the Pentecostal prosperity gospel kind of environment. So my
Interesting.
mom was a faithful Christian, but many people in that environment were not.
Right.
Nevertheless, I heard a gospel preaching that was pretty poor in terms of just theologically. It wasn't that it wasn't strong, but
Yeah.
yet God used that to save my soul.
Mm.
And I remember that night thinking, I must live for Christ. Christ is precious. Life is worthless for me if I can't live for Him.
Mm.
And that was when I was 19, many years ago now. And I started reading my Bible really for the first time in my life. I started praying and pursuing God, and then over time, I developed a passion for theology, for history, for philosophy, really for cultural and social political issues. So
Mm.
then in 2015, at the time when Black Lives Matter emerged out of the Ferguson riots. Before the George Floyd riots, you had the Ferguson riots
Mm.
when Darren Wilson, a white police officer, killed justifiably a black man named Michael Brown in Ferguson,
Mm.
Missouri. And a lot of my friends, my black Christian friends, were embracing critical race theory, social justice, Black Lives Matter, and they were starting to label some of their pastors or some of their white Christian friends racist
Mm.
because they disagreed with Black Lives Matter and the whole social justice movement. And I was like, wait a minute, what is happening here? We had this unity within the church, and I mean the church universal, not just my local church,
Right.
over just, there was no racism. Or, I mean, of course, you will have individuals who are racist, but there was not racism being taught from pulpits. But yet,
Right.
that became the narrative because some churches were not embracing Black Lives Matter or disagreed with the prevailing narrative over the shooting. So then I thought, let me just, instead of just reaching out to everyone that I was concerned about, saying, hey, here's why I think you might be wrong on this. Let me create a blog where I can just share my thoughts, and then people can just have, and maybe an easy way to read why I, as a Black Christian, disagree with Black Lives Matter and critical race theory. That was in 2015, I guess 7 years ago now. And by the grace of God, I'm still writing on these issues, and people are reading it. I'm grateful that's led me to people like you wanting to talk to me about what I read about.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So what was kind of the impetus or inspiration behind the idea of slow to write? I've heard you explain it before, and I love the idea. So I just kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to share what kind of the inspiration is behind
Yeah,
the idea of slow to write.
yeah. So I always laugh about that question because I am a bit less so now, but I really am slow to write. I take a long time. So in a sense,
Right.
it is very literal that it takes me. When I first started writing, it would take me altogether like 30 hours to write something. Like
Yeah.
I struggle with trying to put all my thoughts together. Um, but but really though, it's a reference to James 1:19, where James says that everyone should be slow to speak and quick to listen.
Mm.
And one of the issues with critical race theory or the Black Lives Matter issue, especially concerning the police shootings, is that people were not being slow to speak. They were instead being fast to speak and slow to listen.
Mm.
And that was what I wanted to address, saying that, look, I want to be different. I want to be humble. I want to recognize that I don't know people's motivations. I don't know the facts. I want to be patient and trust God, right? As the Bible says, one man speaks and sounds right, but then the other one comes and examines him, and all of a sudden, you know that, wait a minute, the first person who seemed right was wrong. Um, I am
Mm.
prideful enough that I always want to be right. So
Right.
since I want to be right, I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, I want to make sure I take my time. So, so slow to write is a reference to James 1:19 on being slow to speak and quick to listen.
Awesome. That's great, and I really do appreciate your humble and biblical approach in your writing as well. I'm kind of going to throw this on you as we start. I didn't really let you know prior to doing this that I was going to ask you about it, but I kind of wanted to. Would you share the Ambrose University kind of experience that you had
Yeah,
and situation there? I thought it was an interesting story, and I think it'd be kind of cool for my listeners to hear that story if you wouldn't mind.
no problem, no problem. Yeah. So last year around this time, I was someone from Ambrose reached out to me, saying, "Hey, would you be willing to do a talk on racism for us for Black History Month?" I said, "Sure, no problem." So it was an online or virtual talk because we were, I think, on a lockdown. I think at the
Hmm.
time it was our third lockdown. Now we're in our fourth lockdown here in Ontario. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, I did my talk, and it was simply titled "What is Racism?" Now, the person is a genuine believer, and they've become my friend since then. And
Hmm.
they said to me that, "Hey, I'm a conservative, a Christian conservative in a very liberal school, and they've approved of you speaking. But I know that if you say everything that you normally say, it would just shock them. So I don't want you to not say the truth at all, but say the truth, but just recognize the audience. So just maybe ease up into it." Now, she was not asking me to compromise at all. I just knew what she was saying.
Yeah. And it is a Christian university, correct?
Supposedly, yes.
By name.
By name, yes. Yeah, this is
Okay.
Ambrose University. And I mean, I'll just say this: the president of the school has written an article or two for the Gospel Coalition Canada.
Hmm.
So this is fairly well known, and even for some people, they would still consider them conservative, but they're not at all. By conservative, I mean biblically conservative, as in the theologically, many would
Right.
say they're Christian. But as I found out, that's not the case at all. So I did the talk, thinking that I'm going to actually have a pretty watered down version of it. Again, still truth, but not saying everything I really want to say about critical race theory.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was titled "What is Racism?" and I simply said, look, the Bible is the authority on racism, right? That we cannot define racism based on what critical race theories say. We define it based on what the Bible says. And that racism is simply another word for partiality. Partiality in the Bible is prejudice or discrimination. Racism is simply partiality against someone because of their skin color. I affirm that there's no such thing as race. Race is really a social construct. That is true. There is only one race, and that's in Adam. Or in some ways, there's two races. That's either you are with Christ or you are against him. But in terms of humanity-wise, there's only one race. So then I said, especially, and this is a key point, if we Christians believe that if we agree with God that racism is simply partiality, then if we claim our nation, Canada or America, is systemically racist, what we're really saying is that our country is uh, systemically partial against Black people or people of color. So then I said, then that means that you have to find something within the system. You have to find a policy or a law that is actually showing partiality. It cannot be based on disparities because that's not evidence of anything. It has to be partiality against someone. And I asked them, can any of you give me a single example of this? They all couldn't. I've asked the same question 1,000 times over the last 7, 8 years. No one can ever answer that question because it doesn't exist. And that was my point. So I said, therefore, systemic racism does not exist. That was it. I left the virtual talk, and everything seemed okay. But then a few weeks later, my friend said, "Sam, your talk at the school is causing a lot of havoc. People were very upset. Some people were very blessed by it. I mean, I know many people who changed their mind on not just that issue, but just on liberalism as a whole. Many of them came to affirm biblical. Some of them had their gender pronouns. These are some of the students. They had their preferred gender pronouns in their bio. They removed it. They were telling me that my talk helped them realize that the Bible is the authority on these issues. But the school ended up publicly denouncing me through their website, saying that I was denigrating the students, that I was rejecting systemic racism, which I did. But they then said that that's because I was not rejecting racism. which is odd because this is basically an all-white school, and I'm a black man. And now, look, I don't want to judge anyone based on their skin color, but it's pretty
Right.
odd when you're telling me that, hey, as a black person, we want to hear your lived experience. We want you to come to the school to talk about your experiences.
Right.
Yeah, your. But then when I come do that, since I'm not agreeing with you, you say, wait a minute, well, you're a racist, right? And again, you're white and I'm black. So it
Right.
was quite interesting. But so they thought they didn't mention my name at all, thinking that that would be an easy way for them to get away with it. But my friend said, hey, they actually released a statement, just so you know. And the students knew who I was. So I thought, wait a minute, they're shaming me. I can't allow that. So then on social media, I called them out. I wrote a blog against them. Then the National Post. For those who may not know, the National Post is as the name suggests, they are national news media here in Canada, and they made a front page article about it. So the school then started panicking and getting worried, and then in a private call, I can't say too much about it because even though they are frankly an evil school, based on many things that I know about what's been happening, I still want to be hopefully kind to them. But they admitted in many ways that they were lying in everything they said, which I already knew they were lying, but they admitted in their own way that, yeah,
Hmm.
what they said was not true. So that's what happened at Ambrose.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting story, and it's pretty telling to me where the church is at and Christianity is at. If we need to, instead of training Christians to be bold, courageous individuals to go out and reach this world for Christ, we are creating these safe spaces for them when they're offended by somebody else's point of view or perspectives.
Exactly.
It just seems so backwards. Yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, that's it's a wild story, definitely. So what I'd like to do next is really get into kind of the meat of the discussion on critical race theory. And so, Samuel, can you kind of just give us a kind of working definition or idea of what critical race theory is?
Yeah. So critical race theory, in a simplified definition, suggests that America's, Canada's, or really the entire West, or really the whole world's system, but especially the Western system, is irredeemably and foundationally racist and oppressive against Black people or people of color, as they would want to phrase it. They say that this is done through through liberalism, or by liberalism they don't mean necessarily politically. They mean liberalism in terms of like classical liberalism.
Yeah.
So they hate, for example, they mentioned is they believe that the neutral principles of law is racist. They believe that the idea of colorblind ideology is racist. They really reject the civil rights movement's views on racism, in that they believe that actually it's impossible in their mind for anyone to not judge a person based on their skin color. So they suggest that since we all discriminate people based on their skin color anyways, we should, in their mind, we should do it the right way. So which is why in his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, which I call How to Be a Racist,
Mhm.
Ibram Kendi says that racial discrimination is only wrong if it leads to racial inequity, but it's good if it leads to racial equity. What he's saying there is racism is good and necessary if it will produce racial parity or racial equity, or really equality of outcome for people of color and white people. So basically, everyone should have the same things, equality of outcome, which is really communism and socialism.
Yeah.
Now, so the idea is because they hate really Western values and justice, because they hate things like capitalism, for example, which Ibram Kendi labels as really racism as well too, because they hate due process, because they hate free speech, because they hate, as I mentioned before, neutral principles of law, because they hate all these things, because they hate impartiality. They really believe that racism is against white people is necessary in order to help Black people thrive. And for that reason, it's not just anti-American, it's not just anti-Canadian, it's not just anti-West, it's also anti-white, because they believe that the Western system is built by white people for white people, which is why I'm sure many people are familiar with the term rich white man. It's because they really believe rich white men produced. Now, it's true that I guess wealthy white men were built these nations, but they believe that they built these nations to protect people who look like them, right? And which is a lie, but that is what they believe. So then they believe that these people need to be discriminated against so that other people can thrive.
Would you say it is race essentialism? Yeah.
Absolutely. So they agree that race is a social construct. They do, and yet contradictorily, they say, well, we still live in a racialized system and a racialized world. Therefore, race is essential into how we think about things. So
Mm,
absolutely, they are race essentialists. They really believe that the fundamental, the most important thing about a person is their skin color, because it determines what kind of person you are, it determines your life, it determines how you deal with justice, it determines whether you are an oppressor or an oppressed person. So it is
right.
absolutely, they're absolutely race essentialists.
Mm. And it would be so critical race theory would be a subset or subcategory of critical theory, correct?
Yeah. So critical theory. So for those who may not know, critical theory is in many ways just neo-Marxism, right? So for example, I mentioned before that critical race theory is based on the oppressor versus the oppressed narrative. Well, that really
Mm,
comes straight out of Karl Marx's Marxism, right? And his theory of conflict theory. So conflict theory is a very fundamental part of Marxism. But when Marxism is seen as really producing injustice throughout the Soviet Union, then you had neo-Marxists creating critical theory, which is basically to say, wait a minute, how why is it that that Marxism why is it that the utopia isn't happening, right? And then through there you have cultural hegemony rising up. Now, cultural hegemony basically suggests that one of the reasons why the oppressed have not had their class consciousness, or really their wokeness, is that the bourgeoisie, the oppressors, have found a way to oppress the proletariat, the oppressed person, not just through capitalism, but through cultural institutions that reinforce oppression, right?
mm,
So things like religion, they would claim Christianity is teaching the proletariat to embrace oppressive ideas. So, which is why Karl Marx would say that, I'm forgetting the quote now. Religion is the opium of the people, I think is what he said. Right?
right.
Is that
Hmm.
religion, particularly Christianity, is just a drug to keep people oppressed. So critical theory is really a way to analyze all these things and to try to help the proletariat gain class consciousness. And then through that, it ends up leading to critical race theory, where critical theory was more broad within Marxism, just trying to understand why are the oppressed still oppressed in their mind. Critical race theory is very particular in that it's saying, why are Black people still oppressed? Why are Black people not gaining why are they not woke? Why are they not gaining class consciousness? There's a book called um, from from um, from Class to Race by Charles W. Mills. He's one of the I'm forgetting my train of thought here. Sorry.
No
He's one.
worries.
Oh man, I'm forgetting a word. He's one of the uh, oh man, one of the founders. There you go. I couldn't think straight.
Gotcha.
But one one of the founders of critical race theory,
Mm,
and he said that Karl Marx's radical orthodoxy is that race is the class is the essential conflict in society, right? That's Marxism. But he said that his radical orthodoxy, his radical theory, is that it's not class that's the essential conflict, it's race. So critical race theory is basically saying that Karl Marx was right, that there is an oppressor and an oppressed in society. There is an essential conflict between good and bad. There are evil people harming innocent people. However, he is wrong when he says it's capitalism. That's the real issue. It's that's a matter
Mm,
of class. Saying no, that critical race theory is saying it's really white people against black people. That is really
mm.
the essential conflict.
Thank you for unpacking that for us. Um, so why do you think that obviously this kind of thought process, or we could say ideology, or worldview, has kind of swept into the church in many ways? Why do you think so many Christians are embracing this kind of this kind of thought process?
Um, to be honest with you, I think a lot of people who are embracing this stuff, not all, but many people are just not truly converted. That
Mm,
might seem harsh, but I think the reality is many people love themselves more than they love Christ. They love certain ideologies more than they love Christianity, and that's why some people have embraced this. Now, that is a certain that's not the norm. I'm not saying that every Christian who's embracing this is the case. I'm just saying that I know many people who after embracing critical race theory have left the faith. That's
mm,
because they ultimately just loved critical race theory more than Christ. So some people are embracing this stuff because they're not Christians, but there are some Christians who are embracing this stuff, and that's in part because for a long time, many Christians or the church, many pastors, many parents have not been teaching their children or just people around them about a biblical worldview. So for that reason, many children end up going to high schools or university, and they're being confronted with a different view of justice and cultural issues, and they don't have a biblical basis to say, wait a minute, this is wrong. So earlier I told you about my talk at Ambrose University on racism. I could tell that was the first time any of them were hearing that racism is simply partiality, for example, that the Bible addresses all these things. They didn't know that. And some of them told me this, that they had no idea. So when you're not teaching Christians how to understand these issues, well, somebody else will fill in the gap. And it will be professors and activists in the world who hate Christianity, who disagree with Christianity, and have an alternative view on these things. I think that's why some people are embracing it. On a different side, I think there's also two different things happening as well, but they're somewhat similar. Um, One is there's always a seeker sensitive movement within the church, in a sense that a lot of influential Christians believe that by embracing worldly cultural ideologies like critical race theory, it will be a way to attract certain kinds of people into their churches. It will be a way to
mm,
attract so-called people of color into their churches, right? One of the consequences of us forcing diversity in every area of our life. Now, I'm a black person. I love diversity. That's good. However, forced diversity is no virtue. Diversity is great if it is just an outcome of people just doing good things. It's wrong if you are forcing it, because if you're forcing it, you're actually discriminating against certain people. It's tokenism, right? You just want a black person just because you want a black person, not because you
mm,
love that black person. And then
mm,
ultimately, you will also say, well, you're white. Sorry, there's too many of you. Let's get rid of you. That's wrong. Nevertheless, because of that kind of thinking, many churches believe, well, you know what? Many pastors are saying my church is too white. Essentially, I want to get more black people into my church.
mm,
Therefore, I have to teach critical race theory to attract them. The other thing is, you also have naturally some pastors who are afraid that if they teach against critical race theory, or if they don't embrace it, they will lose the black members they already have in their churches, or they will
mm.
lose the non-white people they have in their churches, and it's leading to a fear that is helping critical race theory thrive within the church.
Interesting. Um, so would you say I know there's been discussion on CRT being either an analytical tool um, that we use to assess kind of the culture and our world around us, versus it being a worldview. And so maybe you can just comment on my thought process here. Because what it seems to be something that has a view of the world,
Mhm.
has a view of um, how people act and function, what
Yeah.
the ultimate sin is, either being the oppressor or a racist oppressor, um, and it seems to provide a remedy for that ultimate sin,
Mhm.
um, and then the ultimate virtue is being on the side of the oppressed individual.
Yeah.
So this seems to suggest that it is a worldview. Am I thought is my thought process correct, um, or am I missing something there?
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. When they say it's an analytical tool, they're lying. It's just what it is. It's
Okay.
it's the same thing when they say that critical race theory is simply the history of racism in America. That's a lie. Um,
Mm,
I, I've read 30, 40 books on critical race theory. That's a lie. They say that because they know their views are radical. And
mm,
and and if you tell people that, that, look, yes, we really believe America is irredeemably racist. That's different than when you say we're just trying to analyze just the history of racism in America. But that's not
right.
true. That's not what they're doing at all. They're not analyzing that at all. They're making claims that, look, when you as you said before, as you said, when you say society is made up of the oppressor and the oppressed, that's a worldview. It's as simple as that, right?
Right.
You say that America, Canada is systemically racist. You're not analyzing, well, okay, are these laws racist or not? No, you're saying it is racism, uh, or racist, because in their view, racial disparities prove racism, right?
Mm,
That is a worldview, right? So, it's in some ways they're analyzing certain things, but I wouldn't even call it that. So they're really deconstructionist, right? And if you're just analyzing something, you're just trying to see, okay, what is this thing about? What is the truth about this thing? What is wrong about this? You're trying to analyze just what's there, but they're deconstructionists, that they're trying to find things to critique or to condemn about about Canada or America, and that's based on their worldview, right? You
mm.
can't critique something unless you already have a bias against that thing, right? So, um, yeah, so it's absolutely a worldview.
Mm, okay. When we get down to when we get down to the gospel, um, I mean, based on what you've said, I think I know the answer, but I'll ask the question anyway. Is
Mhm.
CRT compatible with the gospel in any way, shape, or form?
No, and the funny thing about that, well, it's not funny, but what I would say is interesting about that is critical race theorists would agree with that, um, in a sense that they are very bold in claiming that there needs to be a revolution within the church. I mean, for example, it's not a coincidence that while you're seeing critical race theory, um, you know, I wouldn't say thriving. I don't want to use the word thriving, but as it's growing in influence within the church, you have many people who have embraced critical race theory now deconstructing
Mm,
the church or their faith. That already shows you that there is an incompatibility there, right? Critical race theory says that that worldview is the authority. It is how you see the world. Well, Christ says that, no, I am the authority. I am the authoritative voice on all these things. I am the Alpha Omega. So that you cannot have those two things. You cannot serve two masters. You serve one.
mm,
So these deconstructionists, these critical race theorists are now leaving biblical Christianity because they realize that there is an incompatibility there. And you have some people, look, this always goes two ways. Every Christian that I know who becomes vulnerable to critical race theory, they either eventually reject it or they eventually reject Christianity. I've never seen anything in between. There's always, so long as they keep studying it and they're figuring out what it's really about, they will either reject it or they'll fully embrace it and then leave the faith. So it is absolutely incompatible with biblical Christianity.
mm. I guess what are some pointers that you can give for Christians and maybe even white Christians? How do they approach this subject matter
Mhm.
with other believers? Um, I mean, it just seems kind of hard to approach it for people who have embraced it. For say somebody like myself as a white person, it almost seems off limits because of the color of my skin.
Yeah.
Um, And so how do we approach this um, in the most gracious and loving way,
Well,
without being labeled um, racist?
yeah. Um, if if you are afraid of being labeled a racist, you've already lost.
Hmm.
Um, you know, that is the powerful tool. That is the powerful idea behind critical race theory. That if you oppose it, you are a racist. So if you don't want to be called a racist, either be quiet or don't embrace it, or embrace it. Well, if you embrace it, well, you're in sin because this is a sinful ideology. If you
Right.
are quiet about it, well, now you are silent when people are being harmed by this, when they're being harmed by this unjust ideology. The Bible says that anyone, whoever wants to be godly, will be persecuted. If you want to be godly against critical race theory, you will be persecuted. In that, you'll be called a racist. That would be
Hmm.
persecution. That is you being persecuted because you are believing the truth. You're believing biblical truth. Now, I had I oftentimes get emails from people reaching out to me saying, "Hey, I'm trying to understand critical race theory, and I just want to talk to a Black person about it so they can help me understand it." Right then and there, I'm like, okay, I'll talk to you about it. It'll be a very short conversation in the
Right.
sense. Now, I'm saying that, just in some ways, just to be sarcastic, but I'll
Right.
be with them and I would love them. And I'm glad they want to talk to me. But I'll say the first lesson is you need to repent. um, because as a Black person, I am not an authority on racism. That you've already bought into the narrative already, that
Hmm.
Christ is the authority on racism
Right.
because racism is a sin. Christ died for sin. Christ died for racism. He is the authority. He is God. The Bible is sufficient in addressing these issues, right? In I think it's Second Timothy, or is it one? I'm forgetting, but First or Second Timothy 3:16 to 18. The Bible talks about how all Scripture is God breathed and is profitable for correction and for every training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be complete in every good work. What that's basically saying is, if you read the Bible, if you believe the Bible, if you obey the Bible, you will be complete in every good work. Meaning that you will understand racism more than Ibrahim Kendi. You will understand the sin of partiality more than Ibrahim Kendi. He
Hmm.
is a racist, Ibrahim Kendi, right? So you don't need to understand critical race theory or talk to Black people. I am not an authoritative voice on racism. The only authoritative voice, the only inspired voice, the only inerrant voice, the only sufficient voice is Christ, right? So just
Hmm.
trust your Bible, trust the gospel, trust biblical truth, trust what you have known, throughout your life. If you're a Christian, if you're reading your Bible, just what you've been taught, so long as it's faithful to the scriptures, is true.
Right.
The culture changing does not change the truth. Just believe your Bible, obey your Bible, and you'll be fine.
That's good for sure. So one thing that I've really struggled with is the idea that, like, first of all, like, white people can be inherently racist, um,
Yeah.
and that's just kind of a brute fact. Um, but I struggle with, if white people are inherently racist, um, and yet we're being taught how to not be racist. I don't see how those two fit together, because if I'm inherently racist, how can I change that about myself? It's saying, like, does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Is
And
they want like, the idea is the solution is anti-racism training, or kind of just taking the mantle of that movement. But if I'm inherently racist, I'm just an inherently racist person adding on and adapting these kind of things to my life, but I'm still inherently racist. There's no solution um, to
and
the problem. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And honestly, that's what they're saying too. They believe that. They're saying you will always be a racist. But if you admit you are a racist, then at least you can say, you know what? I simply need to submit to people of color then. That I can never trust myself then. And simply need to divest from whiteness. I simply need to lose my power to become an ally with Black people. That way then, even though I'll always be a racist, at least I will be a subdued racist, right? So that I will always be giving power to Black people or to people of color. and therefore I could, even though I'll always be an oppressor, at least my oppression against them will be limited. Except, so that's what they believe. Well, that's what they want to believe, but they don't really believe that. Which is why Robin DiAngelo is still the best. Is still the best-selling critical race theorist out there from White Fragility, right? So she
Right.
says she's a racist, and yet she's still saying, "Well, I want to sell books, right? I still want to make my money. I still want to charge an obscene amount of money so that people can invite me to their work, so I can talk to them about how racist they are."
Right. Yeah. And so with that in mind, like as you and I brothers in Christ, um, that's why I see it as being so incompatible with the gospel, because you and I as brothers in Christ, there's really no redeeming quality there that you and I can kind of come together if me as a white person is just essentially I'm a racist evil person. Um, there's not really that kind of common ground where you and I can come together um, as brothers in Christ. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Shortly after I think it was shortly after the George Floyd incident, a prominent black pastor, um, he mentioned that, look, I'm sorry, my fellow white Christian brothers and sisters, I can't, I, I can't grieve with you guys the same way I can grieve with black people, right? So he is saying he that there's this unique bond he has with black people more than he has with his brothers and sisters in the faith.
Hmm.
That's scary because, well, black people are just black people. I don't have a bond with the BD just because of our skin color. Now, if we're both Christians, then there is a bond between us because we are children of God. We've been redeemed by Christ. But critical race theorists, as we mentioned before, they are race essentialists. Race is the most fundamental thing about a person. It is not their beliefs. It is not their religion. It is not Christ. It is not anything except their skin color. So if a white Christian is still an oppressor, and then a black Christian is still an oppressed person, well, why would a black Christian have any unity with their white oppressor, right? And that's the danger of critical race theory in that way. So they don't believe in what the Bible says when the Bible says that there's no Jew or Gentile, there's no male or female, there's no slave or master, you're all one in Christ. They don't really believe that at all. In fact, they hate it when people point out that text to say, guys, this text right here completely shatters critical race theory. But they don't. So yeah, they don't believe in true unity amongst black Christians and white Christians in the faith.
That's interesting. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely something I struggle with. For that's just yeah, and Christians should really take that to heart and understand what they're adopting when they're adopting these kind of these perspectives and these views. For sure, I'd like to kind of refer real quick to one of your articles that I found very interesting, because there's kind of the slogan that went around where white silence is violence. um, and for me personally, seeing kind of a lot of my friends kind of even adopt this and post things like this, and um, all over social media, and I'm looking at these things and I'm like, man, what do you think about me?
Yeah.
As your friend, even in situations close friends. um, it's scary, it's heartbreaking. But I appreciated your article that was entitled "If Silence is Violence, Then Jesus Was a Sinner." um, I think that was the title. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but can you kind of just unpack that idea um, for us real quick?
Yeah. So the point in the article, so I think I wrote that sometime in June or July 2020, right again, a few weeks after the George Floyd riots and everything, and a lot of people on social media were sharing that silence is whiteness, silence is compliance, and the idea was anybody who was not sharing a black square on their social media, or anyone who was not talking about how oppressed black people are, or the George Floyd incident and everything else. If they weren't doing that, they were a racist. Um, that really troubled me. especially because of the hypocrisy of all those people. All those people, they don't condemn every injustice in society. They don't, and really, it is a complete opposition to being slow to speak. It is so it's very evil on its own. Besides the next point, the more important point, which is if you really believe that, then as I said, then Christ is a sinner because Christ did not denounce every injustice in the world when he was on earth. In fact, when his cousin John the Baptist, which is what I mentioned in the article, when he was murdered by I'm forgetting the person who murdered him, um, but when he
Forgetting
was
the name
murdered
too.
by sorry.
I'm forgetting the name too.
But when he was murdered by one of the leaders at the time, Christ did not. The Bible is very clear that when he heard it, he just went away. And I think the idea was that he was grieving and he prayed to pray to God, but he did not condemn that. At least as is recorded in the scriptures. So was Christ sinful for not publicly condemning that? Was he sinful for being quiet about that? I know some people who grieved the incidents, but they didn't have anything to say about it, right? You can grieve something without saying anything. Besides, let's face it, many of us have different views on what actually happened. So, to be frank, I think it's justifiable to believe that while it's a horrific incident, that we don't, even though Derek Chauvin has been charged, I'm still not convinced, based on the facts, that it was actually the right legal outcome.
Hmm.
Now, besides that, I am definitely not convinced it was because of racism. There is absolutely zero evidence that George Floyd was killed because of racism, and yet that's become the narrative. So many people were quiet or were silent about it because they wanted to gather the facts as they biblically should be doing. And even if they weren't trying to gather the facts, there's so many things. There's abortion happening. Not everyone is addressing abortion. There is human trafficking going on. Not everyone. We all can't address the same things. Right now, if someone wants to address it, if God is compelling someone to address an issue and they're refusing not to, that's when it's sinful. But the narrative that silence is compliance is very evil and is contrary to biblical truth and is contrary to Christ Himself.
Hmm. I appreciate you going into that article for sure. So as we kind of man, this has been a great discussion, and we could probably go on for another hour or two. Um, but as we we're going to get kind of close to wrapping it up. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today, Samuel. Is there an encouragement that you can leave with us as believers in the midst of what seemingly is kind of just a sweeping movement of this? um, and in our culture and somewhat in the church as well. Is there some encouragement that you can kind of leave us with?
Yeah. Racism was the norm in the West, or especially America or Canada, for 300 years, and then God's people ended it through the ended slavery and segregation. Um, in the same way, while critical race theory is prevalent across our culture, um, we can defeat it. In fact, it's being overcome in certain cases. So, for those who might be familiar with the Virginia election just a couple of months ago, It was really just homeschooling moms' opposition to critical race theory that overturned, or that helped the Republicans to win that election. That's a small example, but critical race theory is increasingly um, now under attack in a right way, where many of them now are starting to backpedal. Even within the church, many of the critical race theories teaching critical race theory, it's still prevalent within the church, but there is now significant pushback against them. And I'm confident that, I don't know how long it will take, but I'm confident this just be one of the many things that the church will overcome. Um, Look, the Bible's very clear on these things. The gates of hell want to destroy the church, but they will not overcome it. Now, as individuals, I know there are many people who are struggling with with their relatives or at work or at school with critical race theory. Just be confident in the scriptures, and whatever happens, just know that the most important thing is not submitting to anyone. Is not being obedient to anyone except Christ. All right, we're called to honor Christ, to obey Christ. Don't obey the culture, obey Christ. The other thing is, this is really our only real hope, is that Christ will return soon and he will make all things new. He will end all injustice. He will end all racism against black people or white people. He will end all partiality and he will reign on earth and we will be his people and he will be our God. So that is our greatest hope.
Amen. That's great. Um, as we again kind of get close to wrapping it up, we're going to be heading into our locals community extended segment in just a minute. And so I encourage you, if you haven't subscribed to our locals page, you can get that bonus segment from each interview that we do. And you can go to ryanhomespodcast.locals.com. And as we near the end, Samuel, I just want to give you an opportunity to kind of plug your different things that you've got going, and so people know where to find you. So I'll give you a minute now to just kind of let people know where they can find your work and support you as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm working on a number of things. I'm working on a curriculum for critical race theory for parents. I'm working on, Lord willing, starting to write a book this year. I'm working on soon, hopefully, a podcast with my fiance and soon to be my wife. I'm working on hopefully, we're both Canadians, and I've been talking to people about wanting to do a pretty major project for Christian conservatives in Canada, and but that's all really secondary for me. My biggest passion is just blogging and writing. So I'm doing all those things while blogging and writing. So if anybody wants to support my work, they can support me through Patreon, Patreon at Slow to Write, or PayPal, also Slow to Write. Yeah, please just read my blog, comment, share it, and if you feel inclined to support my work through PayPal or especially Patreon.
Awesome, for sure. And we will, for everybody listening, we'll link to those in the show notes below so that you can easily find his resources. And so we're going to head over to our locals community portion now, where I'm going to ask Samuel some questions about the pro-life work, some of the pro-life work that he's doing. And so again, I encourage you to check out our locals page. Samuel, I really appreciate you joining me for this episode and taking the time to let me just fire some questions at you. So again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Awesome. So everybody, we will, again, this will be it for the episode. And if you have any questions about the episode, send me an email to ryanhomespodcast@gmail.com. Questions, thoughts, prayer requests, anything like that. And we're going to wrap it up, and we'll see you next week.